Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm Gary Cohen, Senior Editor of Industrial Cybersecurity Pulse, a new brand dedicated to providing critical information and solutions to cybersecurity professionals working in industrial environments. Joining us today is Pranav Patel, CEO of ResiliAnt, an industrial cybersecurity brand, and MetaTechSafe, a healthcare security brand. Pranav has previously held multiple executive leadership roles with companies like GE and Siemens. Pranav, welcome, and thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So some analysts say that cyber incidents in manufacturing have grown by at least 30 times compared to 2012, despite increased awareness about cybersecurity risks, new technologies, new vendors. So not to be too blunt about it, but where are we falling short here?
You're right, Gary. I don't think there's a shortage of technologies or vendors when it comes to cybersecurity. There's been a significant influx of capital into cybersecurity R&D. Companies are starting to spend more in cybersecurity. The problem, in my view, is with maturity of cybersecurity in organization. You probably know about 72% of attacks in manufacturing involve some sort of human factors, such as error, misuse, theft. So let's take an example. If you had an employee who you needed to work on some sensitive project, you probably provide him or her access to the sensitive information. Now, the question around maturity comes when the project is over, have you revoked his or her access? Very similarly, you probably have network infrastructure and you have network switches, but are they configured well? I'm sure you have patch management program, but what's the duration between the patching cycle? Didn't they say patching wasn't done on timely basis, and that caused the Equifax event, if you will? So, I think that's very critical. And similarly, password management, do people have weak passwords? Do they use default passwords? I saw on the news, especially in reference to SolarWinds, they use SolarWinds 123 as a password to access build server, and they kept it for 2 years. Very similarly, Aadsmar facility, water facility incident that we just heard, there are multiple things at play. There are all these computers connected to SCADA system. There was a remote access with a team view. Passwords were openly shared, had Windows 7 systems that probably weren't really patched. So you kind of get the point. And when you talk to the people tend to brush the importance off of this aspect by calling it a hygiene factor. And I think we in a vendor community are probably just as guilty for trivializing this particular challenge in comparison to, the big fancy technical solutions that we have, So I think that's kind of where it all stands.
So you talked a little bit about maturity. So how would you explain or define cybersecurity maturity?
Maturity, the easiest way to understand is through an example. So, I may have sensitive information in my office. So I may choose to put locks or security camera to put, some protection and fast response when I'm not in my office. But the question is that sufficient to deliver the risk management you want? What if I only remember to lock the door 20 to 30% of the times? So the practice of locking the door or often locking the door defines maturity, and lock is a control in that sense. So, maturity is getting the most utilization and most value out of a control, and it requires process excellence. So I think about it in this way. It probably provides you the best leverage in risk management because you've invested money and effort and time in putting the controls and tools. Now, if you're not getting the most out of it, you're at loss. So if you try to get most, that's the biggest leverage if you have. So rather than focusing first on maturity, just because of the environment that we're living in, industry is really going after adding more practices and controls. For example, AWWA in water recommends up to 120 cybersecurity controls in a facility. HHS in healthcare is recommending up to 90 controls. If you're a government entity using NIST 853, you have 900 controls to think and manage. And Department of Defense is requiring up to 170 controls. So simply, you need to figure out what controls and practices that you need based on industry, based on your business model, based on how much risk you want to accept or manage. So choosing what controls, technology, tools you put in place, it's about strategic excellence. And that happens a lot of it. But maturity is about operational excellence to get the most out of what you have, the leverage that you have. So that's my view of maturity, if you will, in the simplest form.
How essential is organization in that and achieving cybersecurity maturity? How essential is having that kind of organization?
It's actually very important. It's not a one team sport. It's a combination, right? So what you think about from an organizational perspective is, do you have a culture? Do you have leadership engagement? Do you have people with the right skills? All that is very, very important. What happens today typically is anything and all things around cybersecurity are delegated to the technical teams, right? But how often do you hear terms like lean, Six Sigma, continuous process improvement in IT teams or tech teams? But that's what culturally is required to drive cybersecurity maturity. Our tech colleagues are great at identifying and assessing technology, running a procurement process, and even implementing. But getting the most utilization, driving continuous process improvement, things like that, that's not a muscle that's typically very well developed for these guys. So, I would say our tech teams or tech colleagues can help tremendously and are helping tremendously in strategic excellence. But who's going to ensure that operational excellence element in the cybersecurity, right? And you see more. I think to address the organizational part, Gary, people are hiring and creating roles such as Chief Information Security Officer, CISO. This is a relatively new role. Most of the people tend to come from a tech backgrounds, but also organizations and really given them that much of an empowerment that's needed. So they're initially playing that internal consultant role. And so they're also focused more on strategic excellence rather than really the depth of influence across the organization they need to have. And so I say, from an organization perspective, if you think it, the CEOs, CFOs, chief operating officers, they need to take a playbook from, let's say, how quality is managed in automotive or aerospace industry, or regulatory affair is managed in medical devices, pharma, or safety is happening in nuclear. It's just part of the DNA. It's one of the essential business metrics, right? And to accomplish that and to bring the organization together, you have to take the programmatic approach, and I think that's starting to happen. I think CMMC is a good way. While they release the rules, I think people are still thinking about the checklist, but what they're getting towards is building that culture of security in the organization and driving. So that it's a little ways away, but it's a good first step.
Got it. So if I can sum up here, so you'd say cybersecurity maturity kind of offers the biggest leverage out there. It's more about operational excellence in cybersecurity, and it takes a different leadership approach.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Just like how it's done in quality or any other ways, right? Just take the playbook.
Outstanding. Pranav, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Happy to be here.
And for more great information on industrial cybersecurity, please check us out at industrialcybersecuritypulse.com and check back regularly for more installments in our CEO Expert Series. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Gary Cohen for Industrial Cybersecurity Pulse. We'll see you next time.